A child with nowhere left to go asks the most powerful man in the city for permission to sleep on the floor, and the answer changes both of their lives forever. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. The rain had been falling since dusk, not gentle, not forgiving, but heavy and relentless, as if the city itself was trying to wash something away. Midnight had passed unnoticed, swallowed by neon reflections and empty streets, when the black car finally rolled to a stop beneath the awning of the Belmont Tower. The driver stepped out first, opening the door with practiced efficiency, but the man inside waved him off. "I'll walk," he said. The lobby doors slid open with a soft hush, sealing the rain outside and replacing it with warmth, marble, and silence. The Belmont at this hour was a different world. No chatter. No footsteps echoing with purpose. Just polished stone floors reflecting chandelier light like frozen water, the faint scent of expensive wood polish, and the low hum of a building that never truly slept. He had chosen this place deliberately. After nights that ran too long and decisions that weighed too heavy, the lobby was a neutral ground. A pause. Somewhere no one dared approach him. Somewhere he could exist without being needed. He shrugged off his coat, water dripping onto the marble, and took a few steps forward. That was when he saw it. At first, his mind refused to process it. The shape was wrong for this place. Too small, too still. Curled near the elevators like a forgotten bundle of fabric someone had left behind. He slowed. Security was usually sharp. Too sharp. Nothing went unnoticed in Belmont Tower. Not a misplaced bag. Not a visitor who lingered too long. And yet there it was. He took another step. The shape shifted. A small shoulder rose and fell. A breath. It was a child. The boy couldn't have been more than 8, maybe 9. Thin to the point of fragility, knees tucked to his chest, arms wrapped tight around himself as if he could fold into nothing. A hood had been pulled over his head, but it did little to hide the dark curls peeking out, or the dirt smudged across his cheek. His shoes were soaked through, laces knotted together like someone had tied them in a hurry, and his backpack lay beside him, flattened and limp, as if it held everything he owned, and nothing at all. The man stopped completely. For the first time in years, the instinct to assess, to calculate threat and consequence, failed him. This wasn't a situation that belonged in his world. Children did not sleep on marble floors beneath chandeliers. Not here. Not ever. And yet the boy was shivering. A quiet, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his body, his breath coming out in short, shallow puffs that fogged the air in front of his face. The man glanced toward the security desk. Empty. The monitors glowed silently, showing pristine hallways and locked doors. No alarm. No alert. Unacceptable. He took a step closer, his shoes echoing softly in the vast space. The boy stirred at the sound. His head lifted slightly, eyes blinking open, unfocused at first, then sharpening with the kind of alertness that came from living in fear too long. He pushed himself up on one elbow, gaze darting instinctively toward exits, toward shadows. Then his eyes landed on the man. He froze. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes that still carried the scent of rain. His face was calm, expression unreadable, the kind of face people learned not to question, the kind of man whose presence alone bent rooms around him. The boy swallowed. "I'm sorry," he whispered immediately, voice rough from cold and sleep. "I didn't mean to make a mess." The man frowned. "You're not making a mess." The boy hesitated, clearly not expecting that answer. "I'll go," he added quickly, scrambling to his feet too fast, nearly losing his balance. He grabbed his backpack and hugged it to his chest like a shield. It's warm in here. I won't stay long." Something in the man's chest tightened. "How long have you been here?" he asked. The boy shrugged, eyes dropping to the floor. "Since the rain got bad. And before that?" Another shrug. Smaller this time. The silence stretched. The man looked around the lobby again. At the marble floors, the gleaming walls, the soft lighting designed to impress and intimidate all at once. This building had been designed to keep people out, not draw them in. And yet this child had found his way inside. "Where's your family?" the man asked quietly. The boy's fingers tightened around his backpack straps. "Don't have one," he said after a moment. "Not anymore." The words were flat, practiced. Too practiced for someone so young. The man exhaled slowly, something old and sharp stirring beneath his ribs. He had built an empire on control, on ensuring nothing unexpected ever reached him unless he allowed it. And yet here, in the quiet after midnight, something had slipped through every barrier he owned. A child on a marble floor. Cold. Afraid. Trying not to take up space. The man looked down at him and realized, with a clarity that stole his breath, that this night was already broken. Not by rain, not by danger, but by a question the boy had not yet asked, and an answer the man did not yet know how to give. The boy stood where he was, shoulders drawn inward, as if trying to shrink himself small enough to be overlooked by the building itself. Up close, the signs were impossible to miss. The shoes were the first thing the man noticed. They were at least 2 sizes too big. The toes bent upward where the leather had softened and cracked, the soles worn thin and slick. The laces had been tied twice around the ankles to keep them from slipping off, a careful knot done by someone who had learned through trial and error how to make do. Winter shoes borrowed from no one. The boy's hands came next. Bare. Red and raw at the knuckles, fingers trembling slightly despite the warmth of the lobby. Not the tremble of fear alone, but the kind that came from hours spent outside, muscles still remembering the cold. And his eyes. They were the kind of eyes the man had seen before, though never on a child this young. Eyes that didn't ask for anything. Eyes that watched for permission to exist. Eyes trained, over time, to disappear. The man straightened slowly, careful not to loom, though he was used to towering over people without concern. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy hesitated. A flicker of calculation crossed his face, deciding whether a name was safe to give away. "Leo," he said finally. "Sir." The honorific slipped out automatically. The man nodded once. "Leo," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "How old are you?" 8. Another pause. "Almost 9. Where are you staying tonight?" Leo's shoulders lifted in a small, helpless shrug. "I don't know yet. Not nowhere. Not outside. Just, I don't know yet." A child's way of softening a hard truth. The man glanced toward the elevators, then back to Leo. "You shouldn't be sleeping on the floor." Leo's lips pressed together. He didn't argue, didn't explain. He simply nodded, as if agreeing with a rule he'd already broken 100 times before. "I won't be loud," he offered quietly. "I promise." Something twisted in the man's chest. "Why do you think you'd need to promise that?" he asked. Leo shrugged again, eyes fixed on the marble between his shoes. "People don't like noise." The man followed his gaze and noticed the faint, damp circle where Leo had been curled up, the outline of a child-shaped absence in a place designed for polish and perfection. "Did someone bring you here?" the man asked. "No," Leo said quickly. "I came in when the door was open." "And before that?" Leo shifted his weight, backpack rustling. "I was near the train station." The man inhaled slowly through his nose. That was not an answer a child should have ready. "Where's your coat?" he asked. Leo looked down at himself, as if noticing his thin hoodie for the first time. "Lost it," he said. "A while ago." "How long is a while?" Another pause, longer this time. "Before it started snowing," Leo said softly. The man clenched his jaw. Security should have noticed. Someone should have noticed. A building like this had cameras, guards, protocols stacked on protocols. And yet this child had slipped through, unnoticed, like he belonged nowhere. "Are you hungry?" the man asked. Leo's stomach betrayed him before his mouth could. A small, unmistakable growl echoed in the quiet lobby. Leo flushed, embarrassed. I'm okay. The man held his gaze, didn't smile, didn't soften his voice. He simply waited. Leo sighed. Yes. Thirsty? Another nod. Cold? Leo's shoulders hunched. A little. The man looked away, toward the gleaming walls, the gold inlay, the furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. He had ordered entire blocks cleared without losing sleep, had made decisions that ruined men who deserved it, and some who didn't. And yet the thing unraveling him was a boy with shoes too big for winter. Leo, he said finally, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Leo lifted his eyes. Has anyone told you to leave places like this before? The boy nodded immediately. All the time. Has anyone ever told you to stay? Leo blinked, thrown by the question. No, he said. Not really. The man exhaled. Somewhere deep inside him, a rule cracked. Not a written one. A personal one. The kind you don't know exists until it breaks. Leo stood there, small and quiet, waiting to be dismissed. And for the first time in a long time, the man did not know how to walk away. Because he could see it now, clearly and painfully. This child had learned how to survive by becoming invisible. And tonight, in a lobby built for power and presence, he had been seen. The silence stretched between them, thin and fragile, like ice that hadn't decided yet whether it would hold. Leo shifted his weight again, the oversized shoes scuffing softly against the marble. He kept glancing toward the elevators, then back at the doors, measuring time the way children who have nowhere to be always do, waiting for the moment someone would notice him too much. The man watched him without speaking. He had learned long ago that silence made people fill it. Confessions spilled faster when you didn't rush them. But this wasn't an interrogation room. This was a lobby at midnight, and the boy in front of him wasn't hiding secrets. He was hiding hope. Leo hugged his backpack tighter, knuckles whitening around the straps. Sir? He said quietly. The man looked at him. Yes. Leo swallowed. His eyes flicked up for half a second, then dropped again. He rocked slightly on his heels, as if bracing for impact. Is it okay? He began, then stopped. Started again. Is it okay if I sleep here tonight? The words were barely louder than the hum of the building. They weren't rushed. They weren't demanding. They were placed carefully, like something fragile being set down in front of a stranger, as if the question itself might break if handled wrong. The man felt it hit him low in the chest. Not like a threat, not like an insult, like a quiet collapse. Leo rushed to fill the space before an answer could come. I won't be in the way, he said quickly. I can stay over there. He gestured vaguely toward the shadowed corner near the wall. I don't move when I sleep, and I wake up early, before people come. The man said nothing. I won't use the bathroom, Leo added, and I won't touch anything. I promise. His voice wobbled, just slightly. He clenched his jaw hard, forcing it steady again. It's really cold outside. There it was. Not fear of being caught. Not hunger. Cold. The man had faced down men with guns who'd begged better than this. He had watched rivals plead for mercy with tears and shaking hands, voices cracking under the weight of consequences they'd earned. None of that had prepared him for a child asking permission to exist for one night. Leo waited. His eyes were fixed on the man's shoes now, polished and dry, standing on marble warmed from beneath. Leo didn't dare look up. He already knew how this usually went. There would be an apology, a security guard, a gentle but firm hand pointing him back toward the door. He braced for it. The man felt something inside him fracture. He thought of the rules, unwritten and absolute, that governed places like this. No loitering, no exceptions. No children sleeping on floors beneath chandeliers that cost more than entire apartments. He thought of his men, his building, his reputation. How easily one word could restore order. And then he thought of the way Leo had asked. Not, can I stay? But is it okay? As if he already believed the answer might be no. How long? The man asked instead. Leo blinked, startled. Just tonight, he said quickly. Just until morning, when it's light again. Why light? Leo hesitated. People are nicer when it's light. The man closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them again, his voice was lower, rougher than before. What happens in the morning? I leave, Leo said simply. I always do. The man crouched down then, slowly, bringing himself level with the boy's eyes. Leo stiffened at first, then relaxed slightly when he realized the man wasn't reaching for him. Up close, the exhaustion was clearer, the faint shadows beneath Leo's eyes, the way his lips were dry, cracked from cold air, the way he smelled faintly of rain and pavement and something like old cardboard. You shouldn't have to leave, the man said. Leo frowned. It's okay, he replied quickly. I know how. That hurt more than the question. The man drew in a breath, steadying himself. Leo, he said carefully, has anyone ever told you you're allowed to take up space? Leo looked genuinely confused. Like, on the train? No, the man said. Anywhere. Leo thought about it, really thought, then shook his head. No, he said. They mostly tell me not to. The lobby felt suddenly too large, too empty, too quiet for a place that had just heard something this honest. The man stood slowly. Leo's shoulders tensed. This was it. But instead of calling security, instead of stepping away, the man did something Leo didn't expect. He took off his coat. It was heavy, lined, still warm from the car. He folded it once and held it out, not pushing it forward, just offering. If you sleep here tonight, the man said evenly, you'll be warm. Leo stared at the coat as if it might disappear if he looked too long. That's allowed? He asked. The man met his eyes. Tonight, he said, it is. Leo's breath hitched. Just once. He nodded quickly, afraid to speak again in case it changed. Thank you, sir, he whispered. The words carried everything he hadn't said. And as Leo curled up on the marble floor once more, this time wrapped in warmth, the man realized something with absolute clarity. No threat had ever shaken him like this, because this question didn't ask for mercy. It asked whether kindness was permitted. And his answer had already set something irreversible in motion. The footsteps came quietly at first, measured and professional, the kind that blended into the background until you learned to fear what followed them. 2 security guards emerged from the far corridor, uniforms crisp, posture alert. They slowed when they saw the boy curled on the marble floor, wrapped in a coat far too expensive for him, his backpack tucked beneath his head like a pillow. One of them stopped short. The other's jaw tightened. Sir, the taller one said carefully, eyes flicking from the child to the man standing nearby. We can't have this. The man didn't turn around. It's after midnight, the guard continued, lowering his voice out of habit, not kindness. No loitering, no exceptions. You know the policy. The policy, it wasn't written on paper, not really. It lived in gold trim and marble floors, in the unspoken understanding that certain spaces were not meant for certain people. It lived in silence, in security doors that closed a little faster when someone didn't belong. The man stared at the boy, at the way Leo had curled inward even in sleep, as if still expecting to be moved along. The coat rose and fell gently with each breath. He's sleeping, the man said. Yes, sir, the guard replied. And that's the problem. The second guard shifted his weight. If we allow this, word spreads. People assume. Assume what? The man asked quietly. The guard hesitated. That this place is open. The man finally turned to face them. His expression was calm. Too calm. How long has he been here? The man asked. The guards exchanged a look. We're not sure, one admitted. He must have slipped in during a shift change. Hours, the man said. Not a question. Silence answered him. He didn't steal, the man continued. He didn't damage anything. He didn't ask for money. No, sir, the guard said. But rules aren't about intent. They're about order. The word struck something loose. Order. The man remembered a very different night, decades ago, standing outside a building not unlike this one. He'd been younger then. Colder. A boy with too much pride and not enough protection. He remembered the security guard who wouldn't meet his eyes as he was told to move along. Remembered the way warmth had looked from the other side of glass. Back then, he hadn't had the power to argue. Now he did. And when order costs a child a night of warmth? The man asked. The taller guard swallowed. Sir, we have procedures. The man nodded slowly. So did the men who turned me away once. That made them pause. You know who I am, the man said evenly. You know what this building represents. Power, control, precision. He glanced back at Leo. And yet somehow, he went on, a child slept on this floor, without anyone noticing until now. The guard said nothing. That's not order, the man said. That's blindness. One of the guards cleared his throat. Sir, if this is an exception, it needs to be documented. The man's mouth curved slightly, not a smile. Document it, he said. Write my name at the top. The guard hesitated. Sir. Or, the man interrupted softly, you can write down that you removed a sleeping child into the snow because a rule told you to. That did it. The guards looked toward the doors instinctively, as if the cold outside might argue for them. The second guard lowered his eyes. We didn't mean... I know, the man said. That's what makes it worse. He stepped closer to them, voice steady, controlled. There was a time when I believed rules were the only thing standing between chaos and survival, he said. I believed mercy made men weak, that exceptions invited disaster. His gaze hardened. That belief nearly destroyed me. He looked back at Leo, sleeping peacefully now, unaware of the conversation happening over his fate. This building doesn't need another rule, the man said. It needs a memory. The guards stood silent. Finally, the taller one nodded once. We'll stand down. For the night. For as long as I say, the man replied. Yes, sir. They stepped back, retreating into the shadows they were meant to guard, leaving the lobby quiet once more. The man returned to where Leo slept and crouched down, adjusting the coat so it covered the boy's feet. Leo stirred, but didn't wake. Sleep, the man murmured, though he didn't know why. Maybe he was saying it to himself. As he stood again, the man realized something with startling clarity. Power had taught him how to enforce rules, but tonight reminded him why he'd once learned how to break them. And the rule written in gold. The one that said some people didn't belong, had just cracked. Morning crept into the lobby the way it always did, slowly, reluctantly, pale light sliding across marble as if afraid to disturb what the night had held together. Leo stirred first. He didn't sit up right away. He lay very still, eyes open, watching the ceiling as if measuring whether it was safe to move. Only when he realized the man was still there, seated a short distance away, jacket off, coffee gone cold in his hand, did Leo relax enough to breathe properly. You stayed, Leo said quietly. The man looked up. I said I would. Leo nodded once, as if filing that away under things adults sometimes actually mean. He pushed himself up, folding the coat carefully before holding it out. Thank you. I didn't get cold. The man took the coat, but didn't put it on. You can keep using it, he said. For now. Leo hesitated, then nodded again. Gratitude lived in his movements, not his words. They sat in silence for a moment. The lobby was waking now, cleaners arriving, lights brightening, the faint sound of life returning to a place that pretended it never slept. What happens to you during the day? The man asked. Leo shrugged. I walk. Sometimes I sit in the library if it's open. Or the station, depends. And school? Another shrug, smaller. Haven't gone in a while. How long is a while? Leo traced a line on the marble with his finger. Since my mom got sick. The man's attention sharpened. Sick how? She coughed a lot, Leo said, and got tired. Then one day she didn't come back. The words were simple. Too simple. From where? The man asked. Work, Leo replied. She said she was just going to talk to someone. Told me to wait. The man felt something tighten. Where did you wait? He asked. Leo pointed vaguely. Outside, near the back door. She said not to move. How old were you? The man asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't sit right. Leo thought about it. 7. The lobby seemed to tilt. How long did you wait? The man pressed. Leo's brow furrowed. Until it got dark. Then all the lights turned off. I fell asleep. And then? The man asked quietly. Leo shrugged again, but this time his shoulders trembled slightly. I waited again the next day. And the next. I thought maybe she was mad because I asked for lunch money. The man closed his eyes for a brief moment. Leo, he said carefully, did anyone ever come for you? No, Leo said. Not her. Not anyone. Did anyone tell you she wasn't coming back? Leo shook his head. No, but after a while I figured it out. The man leaned forward, elbows on his knees. How? Leo's voice dropped. Because people stopped looking at me like I belonged to someone. That was the detail. Not illness, not poverty, not even neglect. Abandonment. Not the kind that happened in one clean moment, but the slow, calculated kind. The kind where a child was told to wait and never given permission to stop. Leo, the man said, choosing his words carefully. Do you know where your mother is now? Leo hesitated. Some people said she left. Other people said she didn't make it. Who told you that? People who didn't want me around anymore. The man's jaw tightened. Did anyone ever file a report? He asked. A missing person? A school? A hospital? Leo shook his head. I don't think so. She didn't like hospitals. Said they cost too much. The man sat back slowly. This wasn't just homelessness. This was a child who had been erased quietly. A mother who had vanished without paperwork. A system that had benefited from not asking questions. Abandonment with teeth. What's your full name? The man asked. Leo hesitated again. Leonardo Ruiz. The name struck something faint but familiar. Ruiz, the man repeated. Your mother's name? Yes. The man stood, suddenly alert in a way Leo noticed immediately. Do you remember where she worked? He asked. Leo nodded. Cleaning offices, night shifts sometimes. She said people didn't notice her, so it was easy. The man felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. People who weren't noticed disappeared all the time. And children who waited were expected to keep waiting forever. Leo, he said, lowering himself back down so they were eye to eye, I'm going to help you. Leo looked at him carefully. For how long? The man didn't dodge it. As long as it takes. Leo nodded once, then asked the question that told the truth better than anything else. Does that mean I can stop waiting now? The man swallowed. Yes, he said. It does. And in that moment, he knew this story wasn't about a boy who had lost his mother. It was about a world that had decided neither of them mattered. And he was done agreeing with it. The men were used to certainty. They had built their loyalty on it. On the way his voice never wavered. On how decisions came sharp and clean, without room for doubt or discussion. When he spoke, things happened. When he didn't, nothing moved. That morning, they waited. 3 of them stood just beyond the glass doors of the lobby, coats dark, posture disciplined. They had arrived quietly, as always, summoned without explanation. Their eyes tracked the boy first. Leo sitting cross-legged on the marble, coat folded neatly beside him, backpack hugged to his chest. Then their gaze shifted to the man. They saw it immediately. The hesitation. It lived in the way his hands were still, in the pause before he spoke, in the fact that he hadn't already given an order to remove the child, relocate him, make the problem disappear. Problems were meant to disappear. This one hadn't. "Sir?" one of them asked carefully. The man didn't answer right away. He stood near the tall windows, watching the city wake up, light crawling between buildings that had never learned how to care who slept beneath them. Leo's quiet breathing filled the space behind him. For the first time in years, he didn't know which command came next. He had moved men across borders with less thought than this, had ended conflicts with a single sentence. And yet the weight of one small boy and a forgotten name pressed heavier than any rival ever had. "Close the doors," he said finally. The men stiffened, but obeyed. The lobby sealed itself off from the world, a deliberate act. An isolation he had always used for strategy. This time it was protection. One of the men shifted. "Sir, what's the plan?" The man turned slowly. "There is no extraction," he said. Silence. "No relocation," he continued. "No shelter drop. No charity handoff." The words landed wrong, unfamiliar. The men exchanged glances. One of them frowned slightly. "Then what?" The man's gaze went to Leo. The boy looked up, alert, already reading the room, already preparing to disappear again. "Leo stays," the man said. "Not for now. Not until we decide." "Stays." One of the men inhaled sharply. "Sir, that's not—" "Safe?" the man finished calmly. "Controlled? Clean?" He stepped closer, voice lowering. "I've spent my life making sure the world stayed clean by removing what made it uncomfortable." His eyes hardened. "This time, the discomfort is mine." The men went still. "This boy will not be passed along like a problem to solve," the man said. "He will not be questioned like a liability, and he will not be left alone again." The oldest of them, the one who had followed him the longest, cleared his throat. "You're asking us to guard a child." The man met his eyes. "I'm telling you to." A beat passed, then another. "And if someone asks?" one man said carefully. The man's mouth curved, humorless. "Then they ask me." He walked toward Leo and knelt, resting a hand lightly on the marble beside him. "You hungry?" he asked. Leo nodded. "A little." The man looked back at his men. "Food. Something warm. No questions." They moved instantly. As they dispersed, the shift settled in. This wasn't a test. This wasn't a temporary lapse. This was a line being redrawn. When the men returned with food and a blanket, Leo accepted them with wide eyes, glancing up at the man as if checking permission. "It's okay," the man said softly. Leo ate slowly, carefully, like someone used to making meals last. One of the men watched from a distance, something unreadable in his expression. Later, when the boy dozed off again, the man stood and addressed them once more. "You will not speak of this outside this room," he said, "not because it's a weakness, but because it's not yet finished." The oldest man nodded. "Understood." As they turned to leave, one of them paused. "Sir," he said quietly, "this changes things." The man didn't deny it. "Yes," he replied, "it does." And for the first time, the men who had waited for orders their entire careers understood something they never had before. They weren't just guarding power anymore. They were guarding a choice, and it would change all of them. The room was quiet in a way Leo wasn't used to. Not the tense quiet of alleyways at night, where every sound meant danger. Not the hollow quiet of public places after closing, when you learned to stay invisible. This quiet was soft, heavy with warmth, the kind that wrapped around you instead of pressing in. Leo stood just inside the doorway, backpack clutched to his chest, eyes wide as he took it all in. The bed was the first thing he noticed. It wasn't a mattress shoved into a corner or a bench meant to discourage sleep. It was wide, covered in thick white sheets that looked impossibly clean. Pillows stacked neatly at the head, fluffy and inviting. A blanket folded at the foot that looked heavier than anything he'd touched in months. He didn't move. The man waited behind him, arms crossed loosely, giving the boy space. He'd led Leo upstairs himself, past elevators that smelled faintly of metal and polish, into a private floor that felt like a different world entirely. "You can put your things down," the man said gently. Leo nodded but didn't. Instead, he took a careful step closer to the bed and reached out with one finger, touching the edge of the blanket. It was warm. He jerked his hand back as if burned. "It's okay?" Leo asked, voice barely audible.
"Yes," the man replied. "It's yours for tonight."
"For tonight," Leo repeated softly. He edged closer, then climbed onto the bed with exaggerated care, sitting on the edge as if afraid it might vanish if he put his weight on it too quickly. He kicked off his shoes, lining them up neatly on the floor. The backpack came next, placed within arm's reach. He lay back slowly, staring up at the ceiling. The mattress dipped beneath him, holding him instead of pushing back. The sheets smelled like laundry soap and something clean he didn't have a word for. Safety, maybe. Leo blinked rapidly. A tray appeared on the side table, food he didn't recognize at first, steam rising gently. Soup, bread, a glass of milk. The man set it down and stepped back again. "You don't have to rush," he said. "No one's counting." Leo sat up, eyes fixed on the food. "Is this mine?" he asked. "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." He picked up the spoon with hands that shook, then paused. "Can I save some for later?" he asked quickly. "In case." The man felt something tighten in his throat. "You won't need to," he said softly. "There will be more." Leo nodded, but he poured half the soup into a cup anyway, careful and precise. Old habits didn't disappear in warm rooms. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, eyes darting up every few seconds as if expecting someone to interrupt. No one did. When he finished, he placed the tray neatly aside and slid back under the blankets. The warmth settled around him fully then, seeping into places the cold had claimed for too long. His body relaxed before his mind could catch up. The man watched from the doorway, silent. "Sir?" Leo whispered after a moment. "Yes." "Am I in trouble?" The question was barely more than breath. "No," the man answered immediately. "You're safe." Leo swallowed. "Until when?" The man stepped closer. "Until you don't need to ask that anymore." Leo turned his face toward the pillow, eyes glistening. Silence stretched. Then, without warning, the boy's shoulders began to shake. It started small, a quiet hiccup, a single sob swallowed down. But it built quickly, emotion breaking through the careful walls he'd constructed piece by piece. "I'm sorry," Leo whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to cry. The man was beside him in an instant, sitting on the edge of the bed, hand hovering uncertainly. "You don't have to be sorry," he said. Leo curled inward, clutching the blanket. "No one's going to make me leave in the morning?" he asked, the words finally breaking free. The man's chest tightened. "No," he said firmly. "No one." Leo covered his face, tears soaking into the pillow as months of fear spilled out. He cried hard and quietly, like someone who had learned to be small even in pain. The man stayed. He didn't rush him, didn't tell him to stop. He sat there until the sobs slowed and Leo's breathing evened out again. Eventually, Leo peeked at him through red-rimmed eyes. "You'll still be here?" he asked. "Yes." "And the bed?" Leo pressed. "It's not going anywhere." Leo nodded, exhaustion finally winning. As his eyes closed, the man tucked the blanket around him carefully, a gesture that felt strangely heavy and sacred. For the first time in months, Leo fell asleep without planning where to go next. And the man realized, standing there in the quiet glow of the room, that this was no longer about shelter. It was about undoing the damage of a world that had taught a child the floor was all he deserved. Tonight, that lesson ended. The city liked its crimes loud. Gunshots, sirens, headlines that flared bright and burned out fast. Those were the ones people pointed at when they wanted to believe the world was dangerous but simple. What Victor uncovered was nothing like that. It was quiet. It lived in forms never filed, Calls never returned. Doors closed gently instead of slammed. It lived in the space between responsibility and convenience, where everyone assumed someone else would act. Victor stood in a private office long before sunrise, jacket draped over the back of a chair, sleeves rolled up. Screens glowed softly in the dim light as his men worked without speaking, fingers moving across keyboards, files opening one after another. Leo slept 3 floors above him, wrapped in warmth, unaware that his life was being dissected by people who finally cared enough to look. "Start with the mother," Victor said quietly. They did. Her name surfaced quickly, too quickly for someone who was supposed to have vanished cleanly. Hospital records showed visits cut short, clinics that marked her as non-compliant when she left early to get back to work, shelters she never stayed in because they didn't allow children her son's age. "She asked for help," one of the men said, voice tight. "More than once." Victor's jaw clenched. "She worked 2 cleaning contracts," another added. "Both outsourced. No benefits, no paid sick leave. When she missed shifts, they docked her pay. When she collapsed at work, they terminated her." Victor closed his eyes for a moment. "Anyone report her disappearance?" he asked. A pause. "No," someone said. Her employer marked her as voluntary abandonment, no follow-up, no welfare check. "And the child?" Another pause. Longer. "School flagged excessive absences," a man said carefully. "Sent letters. Letters were returned. Case closed due to lack of response." Victor felt something cold and precise settle in his chest. "Child services?" One of the men exhaled slowly. "They never opened a file. No referral ever made it past intake." Silence filled the room. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because everyone understood what this meant. This wasn't oversight. It was design. A system built to move on quickly when the people involved had nothing to offer in return. When paperwork was easier than people. When absence became permission. "Who benefited?" Victor asked. That question changed the tone immediately. Names began to surface. Contractors who cut corners by cycling through workers they never intended to protect. Administrators who quietly closed cases to keep numbers low. Housing departments that lost applications and never looked for them again. No single villain, just layers, a machine that didn't need to be cruel to be lethal. "These aren't men you can scare," one of his men said. "They hide behind policy, committees, jurisdiction." Victor nodded. "Good." They looked at him. "I don't need to intimidate them," he continued calmly. "I need to dismantle what lets them sleep at night." He straightened, voice steady. "Freeze their contracts," he ordered. "Audit every outsourced service tied to this case, quietly, legally, thoroughly." One man raised an eyebrow. "That will make noise." "Yes," Victor said. "The right kind." "And the agencies?" "Expose patterns," Victor replied. "Not individuals. Systems." Someone hesitated. "Sir, this could turn attention toward you." Victor didn't blink. "Let it." He looked down at the file again, at a timeline that showed months of a child slipping through cracks that weren't accidental at all. "This city didn't lose Leo," Victor said softly. "It let him go." Later, when Victor returned upstairs, the sun was just beginning to rise. Leo was awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed, drawing on a sheet of hotel stationery someone had given him. "What are you making?" Victor asked. Leo held it up. A building, a small stick figure inside. A bigger one standing in front of the door. "That's you," Leo said. "You didn't let them close it." Victor swallowed. He sat beside him. "Leo, do you know what happened to your mom wasn't your fault?" Leo nodded slowly. "I know now." Victor placed the drawing carefully on the table. "There are people who should have helped you," he said. "They didn't. That's on them." Leo looked up. "Are they in trouble?" Victor thought of policies unraveling, contracts collapsing, systems forced to look at what they'd erased. "Yes," he said. "They are." Leo nodded once, satisfied. Outside, the city continued as it always had, busy, indifferent, loud in all the wrong places. But somewhere deep beneath its surface, something had been exposed. Not by violence, not by fear, but by a child who had survived long enough to be seen, and a man who decided silence was no longer acceptable. Power had always moved in one direction, downward. Victor Hale had built his reputation on that simple truth. Pressure applied from above, consequences delivered cleanly and quietly. Rivals learned, markets adjusted. The city bent, not because he shouted, but because everyone knew where gravity pointed. This time he reversed it. He didn't start with threats. He started with questions. Audits were requested under perfectly legal pretenses. Contracts were reviewed with unusual patience. Compliance teams that had slept through years of negligence suddenly found themselves drowning in requests for clarification, documentation, timelines that could no longer be brushed aside with polite silence. Victor didn't touch the front of the machine. He went underneath it. Funding streams froze temporarily. Outsourcing agreements were flagged for irregularities. Performance reviews that had always been rubber-stamped were reopened, dissected line by line. Institutions that had profited from speed over care, speed over follow-up, found themselves slowed to a crawl, and panic followed. Calls began coming in by the second week. Victor, this isn't your lane. You're overreaching. This exposes you. He listened to everyone. Then he declined to respond. Instead, he redirected influence toward places that had been starving for it. Legal aid groups that had begged for resources now had them. Social workers who'd been juggling impossible caseloads suddenly had backup, funding, breathing room. It didn't look like dominance. It looked like redistribution. And that terrified people far more. Because you could fight a tyrant. You couldn't fight accountability that arrived wearing a suit and carrying receipts. By the third week, retaliation began. A carefully planted story surfaced, questioning Victor's motivations. A whisper campaign about ulterior interests. A suggestion that he was laundering guilt through charity. Victor expected it. He had already paid the price of reputation once. What surprised his enemies was that he didn't flinch. When one of his men brought him the article, concern etched into his face, Victor read it calmly, then set it aside. "Is Leo okay?" he asked. "Yes," the man replied. "He started school." "Then we're fine." That answer unsettled them. Because Victor Hale was supposed to care when knives came out, he didn't. He cared when a funding cut meant a shelter closed early, when a missed phone call meant a child waited alone, when silence became policy. So he used power where it hurt most. He funded oversight. He demanded transparency. He forced meetings that couldn't be postponed, with people who had grown comfortable never being named. Behind closed doors, administrators shifted in their seats as Victor slid files across polished tables. "This is a pattern," he would say evenly, "not an accident." "We followed procedure," they would protest. Victor would nod. That's the problem. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply made it impossible for them to keep pretending they didn't see. And slowly, reluctantly, systems began to change. Not because they had grown kinder, but because someone powerful had decided indifference was no longer cheap. One night, weeks later, Victor sat with Leo at the kitchen table of the apartment he'd arranged for them. Leo was doing homework, pencil clutched awkwardly, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. "Why are you always tired now?" Leo asked suddenly. Victor smiled faintly. "Because fixing things takes longer than breaking them." Leo nodded, considering that. "But you're not mad." "No," Victor said. "I'm busy." Leo went back to his work, satisfied. Victor watched him, this child who had unknowingly turned an empire inward, forcing it to look at what it had been built on. Power, used backward, didn't crush. It exposed. And exposure was far more dangerous. Outside, the city continued to hum, unaware that some of its quietest crimes were losing their shelter. Not because of outrage, but because one man had decided that if power existed, it should answer to the people it had ignored. and he was willing to burn everything that disagreed. Weeks changed the sound of things. The apartment no longer echoed when Leo walked through it. The heater hummed softly instead of roaring. The refrigerator clicked on and off like it belonged there, and the windows let in light without letting in fear. Shoes stayed by the door because they were taken off, not because they had been kicked away in a hurry. The backpack rested against a chair now, empty most afternoons, waiting patiently for tomorrow. Leo still woke up early. Old habits lingered quietly. Victor noticed it one morning when he found the boy sitting at the kitchen table before dawn, legs swinging gently, a book open but unread. "You're up," Victor said softly. Leo nodded. "I didn't want to wake you." Victor poured coffee, then paused. "You never wake me." Leo hesitated. "I used to have to be quiet. If I wasn't, people got tired of me." Victor sat down across from him. "You don't have to do that here." Leo studied his hands for a moment. "I know," he said. "I just forget sometimes." They sat together as the sky lightened outside, the city stretching awake beyond the windows. This place wasn't luxurious. It wasn't meant to be. It was solid, warm, chosen carefully. A place that didn't impress, but held. Later that day, Leo came home from school with a folded paper clutched tightly in his hand. Victor looked up from the counter. "Good day?" Leo nodded quickly. "I got a gold star." Victor smiled. "That's impressive." Leo shuffled his feet. "They asked where I live now."
And?
"I said, here," Leo replied, voice uncertain. "I didn't know if that was okay." Victor felt something steady settle in his chest. "It's more than okay." Leo nodded, relieved, then disappeared into his room. That night, after dinner and homework and a cartoon Leo insisted on explaining in full detail, the boy lingered in the hallway instead of going straight to bed. Victor noticed. "Yeah?" he asked. Leo rocked on his heels. The question had been living in him for days now, growing heavier the longer he carried it. "Do you remember when I asked you if I could sleep in the lobby?" Leo asked. Victor nodded. "I remember." Leo took a breath. "I was scared you'd say no." "So was I," Victor said quietly. Leo blinked, surprised. "Why?" "Because yes meant responsibility," Victor replied. "And I didn't know if I deserved to give it." Leo thought about that for a moment. Then he asked the question again. "Can I stay?" he said softly. "I mean, not just tonight, or until something else happens." Victor stood slowly and walked over to him. "You don't have to ask that anymore," he said. Leo swallowed. "But I want to." Victor knelt so they were eye level. "Leo," he said, steady and certain, "you can stay as long as you need." The words were simple. They didn't rush. They didn't come with conditions. They didn't hide an ending. Leo stared at him. "How long is that?" he whispered. Victor smiled, just a little. "As long as it takes for you to stop wondering." Leo's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He stepped forward instead and wrapped his arms around Victor's neck, holding tight like someone who finally knew where the ground was. Victor held him back. Later, after Leo was asleep, really asleep, sprawled sideways across the bed, blanket kicked half off without fear, Victor stood in the doorway for a long moment. He thought of the lobby, the marble floor, the question that had broken something open in him. "Is it okay if I sleep here tonight?" It had never been about the floor. It had been about whether the world would let a child belong anywhere at all. Victor turned off the light and closed the door softly. Somewhere in the city, systems were still grinding, crimes still happening quietly, people still slipping through cracks. But not here. Here, a boy had a bed that wasn't temporary, a name that was spoken, a place where staying didn't require permission, and for the first time, the answer meant home.